Welcome to the SEC Oklahoma. We're going to take a look at the 2024 schedule for Oklahoma, their first year in the conference. Before we get to 2024, let's look back at the 2023 schedule. So here's the schedule from 2023 for Oklahoma, of course, the last year in the Big 12. They wound up with a schedule that wasn't too tough, but they did get Oklahoma and Kansas State back-to-back in road games. And they lost both of those games, which, by the way, I did predict them to lose both those games in the preseason, but I also picked them to lose to Texas, and they proved me wrong there. Got a big win. This was a really good team. You know, they just ran into some tough games there on the road, going 10-2, but it was a schedule that wasn't that tough, and really looking back, they got to be beating themselves up because this was a good Oklahoma team, and if they just find a way to win one of those two games, they got Texas in a rematch in the Big 12 championship. They win that game, and you know, Oklahoma's probably in the college football playoff, so they were really close. Although you wonder, with the schedule not as tough, maybe they don't jump Florida State like Texas did. So we won't go down that road. But anyways, the schedule, it really doesn't matter because 2024 is going to be totally different, new conference, and this is that schedule. Before we go game by game, let's kind of break it down. Starting with the non-conference, they have a pretty easy non-conference schedule. Again, Temple, Houston, Tulane, and Maine. So not much of a challenge there. You know, Houston, we'll see how good they are. Perhaps that's a game that'll be competitive. Tulane, new head coach, how good will they be? So those games won't be easy wins, I don't think, for Oklahoma, but games where they should be favored by a decent amount. And then Temple and Maine should be pretty easy wins there. Let's break it down by home and away. Starting with the home games, they get Temple, Houston, and Tulane, and Maine, like I just said, at home. And then in the SEC, they only get 3 home games because Texas is a neutral site game, and that's actually counted as one of their home games this year. So their home games are only Tennessee, South Carolina, and Alabama. Only 3, again, conference games at home. And you're playing 3 pretty good teams there. All 3 of those teams, especially Tennessee and Alabama, those are going to be tough matchups. But you'd like to have them at home, obviously. Good news for Oklahoma, if you look just at their SEC schedule, they do avoid Georgia, but they do play most of the other top teams in the conference. But yeah, 3 games at home in the SEC, and then their road games. Again, we're throwing Texas in there, but that's a neutral site game. And then true road games, you've got Auburn, Ole Miss, Missouri, and LSU. Those are all tough. I mean, all 5 of these games right here are going to be really, really tough. Auburn's a tough place to play. Ole Miss is going to be good. Missouri should be good. LSU, one of the toughest places to play in the country. So it's a pretty tough road schedule here, but I like the way their schedule sets up for the most part. Let's break it down now, going week by week. They'll start with Temple, then Houston, then Tulane. So 3 non-conference games there that, again, Houston and Tulane could be somewhat of a challenge. We'll have to wait and see how good those teams are. But, you know, that's a pretty good non-conference schedule because I think instead of having a bunch of cupcake games, you at least get games where you're going to be challenged to a certain extent against Houston and Tulane. So I like having those games where you should win, but at least you can improve and you're not playing FCS teams or anything like that. So Houston and Tulane there early on, and then they'll get Tennessee on September the 21st at home. Big game there. First game in the SEC. You know, definitely a winnable game. Should be 2 good teams going at it. Really looking forward to that matchup. And then it's a tough road game against Auburn on the 28th. This is a team that I expect to be much improved next year. And again, that is a very, very tough place to play. So Oklahoma's first road game in the SEC will be at Auburn. And then they get a bye week before playing Texas. Really good spot for that first bye week. Again, before a rivalry game, an emotional game against Texas. Then they follow that up with a game against South Carolina, who, you know, figures to be towards the bottom of the SEC. They get them at home. That's a pretty good game to get to play after Texas. They don't get Vanderbilt, so they don't get Georgia. That's a positive, but the bad news is they don't get Vanderbilt. That's kind of the one easy win in the SEC. They get Ole Miss after that on the road on October the 26th. Then they'll get Maine. So the schedule's kind of broken up there. Really tough back-to-back games, at least to this point. They get Missouri after that, again, after an easy win over Maine. They'll play Missouri on the road. That'll be a tough one. Then they get their other bye week really late in the season. That is a very late bye week. But when you get 2, that's not that big of a deal. And then they'll finish things up with Alabama at home and LSU on the road. So the toughest back-to-backs, for sure, at the end of the season there, Alabama and LSU. That is a very tough way to end the season. But again, getting a bye week before Alabama, that's going to give them a great shot there. But overall, I mean, it's a tough schedule. You come into the SEC, you're going to have a tough schedule. Obviously, Tennessee and Auburn back-to-back will be tough. But I just like the way that it's divided up to where they don't have a really tough stretch of 3 or 4 really tough games. Toughest stretch probably going to be Texas, South Carolina, and Ole Miss. I mean, those 3 games, at least in the SEC, that's the toughest stretch right there. So worked out pretty well for Oklahoma. The schedule is obviously going to be tough in the conference. Non-conference, not too bad. And again, I like the way that the games are divided up. I think that's going to give Oklahoma a chance to have a pretty good season in 2024.